We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Good evening, folks. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper.
Is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Time, weather, and
Veteran of 3 foreign wars, entrepreneur, and warrior poet, Tony Arterburn takes on the issues facing our country, civilization, and planet. This is the Arterburn radio transmission.
All right, let's jump right into it, ladies and gentlemen. Transmitting worldwide from deep within the heart of Texas, this is the Arterburn radio transmission. I am your host, Tony Arterburn. This is the official broadcast of the apocalypse. It's the 22nd of January, 2026. I was talking to David Knight earlier, and we were going over some timelines, and I thought, well, that's been 4 years ago, and it doesn't seem that way. In some ways, the past 6 years seems like 60 years, and then in some ways it seems like 6 months. So I think that's the weird dichotomy of the strange times in which we inhabit, folks. And I'm going to dig into some strange times and strange metrics today. A lot of things coming out. You know, it's funny, if you live long enough, and, you know, I started out in broadcasting in 2013, so 13 years ago, and we're talking about a completely different world. And you may think it's similar, and I guess in some ways it is, but in a funhouse mirror version of itself. And we thought things were weird then. But I knew on the horizon we'd have a change in consciousness. A lot of things that were fringe would become mainstream because it just, the accumulating facts surrounding them would be too large to ignore. And I'm going to go over a couple of those issues today. But we are parapolitics and precious metals. So I'll start with a little bit of market analysis. And have you seen the spot prices for metals? Have you taken the time? You know, you can go to wolfpack.gold and get updated daily on the spot prices by our ticker. It just scrolls in real time. I had that implemented about a year ago. So you can go to wolfpack.gold to do that. I use other sites too, just to make sure my frame of reference is correct. But according to goldprice.org, the price of gold today for the yellow metal, 1 ounce is 4,880 Luciferian bankster notes make 1 troy ounce of gold. Silver's at $96.07. The other day, I had some people bring in some sterling silver to the shop in Branson. By the way, since you've heard me last week, I was in Texas, went back to Missouri, stayed there, had to pick up some inventory. I'm back in Texas again, and that's how busy we are right now moving product back and forth. But I had some folks, and they didn't really know silver prices, and they were selling some sterling, and I was quoting them a price, and I said, well, that seems a little low. And I thought that actually has never been that high, ever. And it's just kind of funny when you don't know, like, that we were trapped in this suppressed price for so long. And there's a timeline for that, folks. I mean, the reason you're seeing these prices right now, this is governmental. I'm looking at this price chart. I'll put it up on the screen. The reason that you're seeing this right now, this is fourth dimensional warfare. This is not market forces. Yeah, there's always market forces involved somewhere, right? Profit taking and other things. But this is language. This is about resources. This is about the future. This is about the monetary great reset. And that's what you're seeing right now. Silver at $96. I've always thought that that was a bare minimum of what silver was probably worth in the grand scheme of things. I thought, $100, like if you just relative to emotion and understanding of history, if you hold a 1 ounce silver round in your hand, I think that's about $100 bill. That's what it felt like to me for the past 10 years. But this is a reflection right now of governments moving away, central banks moving away from the dollar. This is de-dollarization happening in real time. Yes, there's Venezuela, there's Greenland, there's language of peace, not not implemented peace. There's wars and rumors of wars, all that stuff, right? And we know about the global debt, and then the debt here in the U.S. As David Knight and I discussed today, we're nearing $40 trillion in debt here in the United States, and it's only going to explode once we reach a certain point, which I think it's about 130% to 140% of debt to GDP, and then there's some sort of cascading mathematical event that happens after that. But this is going back, this whole story of why we're seeing these prices just untethered now, really unleashed from the gravity that's been forced upon them, is because that you were punished. You were punished by the deep state if you exposed the price of what true silver was, like the Hunt family in the late 1970s, early 80s. Anybody who traded gold knew. I mean, Stuart Angler, who I interviewed on my show, wrote a book called Rigged, and he had a foundation set up to show how gold was manipulated by the central bank and governmental forces. This is a new reality, folks, because now those same governments that were colluding in the suppression of the prices of gold and silver have now left. They are adding to the price of gold and silver, and that's why all bets are off. Like, what is the true price here? I don't know. We're in price discovery, and things don't always go up and to the right. If you listen to a commentator in this, and there's some very irresponsible people that come out and talk about what silver is going to be or what gold's going to be, just know that fiat has no bottom. So gold and silver have no top, which means that, if you're basing value against a paper currency that intrinsically has no value and is being used less and less, as I mentioned today, talking to David, just facts and figures. After World War II, 90% of the world used dollars in every financial transaction. By 2001, it dropped to 75%, which is, from 1945 to 2001, that's not a huge dip. And there was globalization and the emergence of China because we opened China, and there was the Japanese economy and the yen, and Europe was back on its feet. So 75% is not that big of a deal. And it went from 75% to 56% in 2022. And the powers that be decided, well, we have to further punish Russia since we finally got them to invade Ukraine like we wanted to, which is we've been trying to get them to invade Ukraine for many, many, many years, especially since the fall of the Soviet Union. We'd like to have another enemy, and that's by design been putting more in like bioweapons labs and surveillance and threatening to bring Ukraine into NATO, all that stuff. Like, so this was by design. We got them to invade, and once they did, we went on the offensive again with sanctions. And at first it worked, and I've talked about this many times. And then there was this moment where Russia just came out and said, we're no longer using dollars, and went direct with other nations and did oil for gold and gold for oil, all this stuff, like this cross-trading commodities, and even things like Bitcoin on cross-border payments and stuff like that. And the ruble bounced back, but the dollar didn't. The dollar started its de-dollarization phase. That's when it really kicked off. So this is just, again, 40% is about what the usage is now. So 56% just 4 years ago, 75% in 2001. So we're in this acceleration phase where the numbers start to add up and then compound, and that's where we are. So to say that anybody really has a good idea of where we're going to be on price, they don't understand black swan events. They don't understand what Winston Churchill called the terrible ifs. The terrible ifs accumulate. We don't know. All I do know is that the fiat system is being reset, and it's being reset before your eyes. As a matter of fact, I'll see if I have enough time. There's one article on Kitco I thought was great about fiat and how they described where fiat is. And if you listen to my show long enough, you know, like I've used similar language, so I thought it was interesting. One of these days I'll be on Kitco. I haven't had enough time to get enough material out, but I'd like to be mentioned on there. I think if you combine my view of history with the view of metals, it's a pretty good mix, and definitely not like you hear anywhere else, because I find that the entire setup, right, with this, what we're supposed to think, is most likely incorrect. And I don't fill the gap with ego and telling you I know what it is. But I want to go over this story. Oh, they got so much stuff to come. I'm looking at the tabs right now. You guys are going to love this show. Let's go to this clip on Bloomberg. And you see the Prime Minister of Canada. And I thought this was interesting because this little clip shows their relationship with China. And I want to discuss this with you because I think it paints it makes you put a question mark over what is actually happening, because nothing really changed in the underlying system. Nothing really changed in the structure of what's happening here in the U.S. with the ruling class. Like, nothing really has changed, but something is afoot, right? With our lurch towards perceived nationalism with our neighbors to the north, doing something a little different, or at least telegraphing something a little different. I'm going to put this on the screen. And so my take on this is a little different than what other people's have been. But anyway, the Prime Minister of Canada, Carney, former central banker, this is something he had to say.
The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is touting a new strategic partnership with China in talks with Xi Jinping in Beijing as part of what he has said is a new world order, in part due to the fallout from Trump tariffs in the United States. Now, there's been a noticeable tone shift from Ottawa towards Beijing as Carney wraps up the first state visit to China by a Canadian leader in more than 8 years. Now, after a lengthy diplomatic chill, the two nations have signed a series of agreements, including an energy pact that could see more Chinese investment in Canada and open up opportunities for China to buy more Canadian oil and LNG. Also, in quite a breakthrough, Carney says Canada will allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into Canada at a tariff of just 6.1%, down from 100%. Xi reciprocated, according to Carney, by reducing its 100% ag tariff on canola or rapeseed to 15%. Xi Jinping hailed the talks as having achieved positive results.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys remember when Justin Trudeau was asked about his model, his favorite government. He was like, "Well, it's China." He's like, with their basic dictatorship. This was the last Prime Minister of Canada, so great job, Canada, there. But I understand we have the same kind of people here, which this is more of a thought experiment, and I'd love to get your thoughts in the chat. You guys want to send that over to me because I'm interested to see what you think. Nothing fundamentally changed here. I mean, the reason that you're seeing this like sort of language, like the fulfillment of the new world order. I like how he puts that. It's like it's very ominous. It's the new world order. Like, it's kind of, I mean, I even open up my show sometimes with that, but not in the same I'm not invoking it the same way that he is, but this is the thought process behind these kind of central, like he's a central banker, the bankster mentality, the internationalist. And you go back and you look at the fundamentals, like the structure of our politics here and Canada and the West in general, past World War I, was the implementation, because the League of Nations failed, because thank God we still have the remnants of the American Republic in the U.S. Senate. It's one of the reasons why they had to push so hard for the 17th Amendment to have the election of senators by bankers instead of the states. But they had tried to get the League of Nations pushed through after World War I, and our people said, no, that's outside of that gives up our sovereignty. It's not constitutional. That's not a treaty. We're not going to do it. And so they said, well, okay, fine. In England, in Britain, City of London, the Rothschilds, and they set up, along with the Round Table, which Cecil Rhodes and the remnants of that, they set up the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR. And what that organization does is, like, if you go back to 2016 and Hillary Clinton shows up at the Council on Foreign Relations office and she's like, I just come here to find out what I'm supposed to think, right? So they use this as a incubator for internationalists for decade after decade after decade. And so CFR infiltrates and permeates every single aspect of government, kind of like Joe McCarthy thought of the communists. He's like, I've got a list of 150 names here in the State Department that are communists. Well, whoop-de-doo now. I mean, it's pretty much all of them. I don't know if they wouldn't that would be like just hit print on who the employees are, and then you're most likely going to find the majority are Marxists or Marxist sympathizers. So that's been a long-term play. And then you end up in the late 20th century with the Secretary of State for Bill Clinton was Strobe Talbot, his former roommate. And Strobe Talbot said the nation state is irrelevant. And this is about the time that Pat Buchanan's running for president in 2000. And so there's this idea by the ruling class, because of things like the Trilateral Commission and the CFR and Zygmunt Brzezinski and all these people, these technocrats, internationalists, believe that the nation state's irrelevant. What fundamentally has changed? This is a thought experiment. Now, I know we have this perceived nationalism here in the U.S., but then you got to add in this weird thing, this affinity for Israel and wars in the Middle East, and we haven't reined in the budget. We haven't reined in the border. We have this incendiary tactic by the federal government with ICE and other things to what it looks like is some sort of internal setup. So we go and hate each other. Like, you're either on this side or that side. It's this strict bifurcation point that we're supposed to have. And I'm not falling for that. I hope you aren't either. There's something fundamentally wrong here. So I don't think anything's changed with the ruling class. I don't think that they disagree with Carney. I look at the board and I wonder, are we being isolated? Like, the whole term isolationist was always a pejorative, is always thrown out at people like me, because I want to bring the troops home and I want a border, not a new world order. And I like having a country. And I think sovereignty is just a freedom, because, it gives you, it's an escape hatch. That's why I don't want a one world government. I mean, one world government, it's always utopian, and the idea, well, at least the people that buy into this garbage, that it's, going to work. But what if a Saddam Hussein takes a charge of a one world government, or some sort of dictator? I mean, what then? The sovereignty and nation states are always a safe haven. It's the principle of the Tower of Babel, like the reason in the Bible, and it's, God speaks of the nations, like everything is different, because you'd have a place to flee to if one gets out of control. It's a fail-safe. And I remember Einstein said something about that nationalism was the measles of mankind. And I really thought about that. I thought, well, measles, supposedly, if you get the measles and you develop the immunity to it, they've done tests to where you ward off cancer a lot easier. And I thought, well, if nationalism is the measles of mankind, well, that wards off the cancer of one world totalitarian socialist government. So just a thought experiment here, as I see Carney doing the deals with the Chinese. They lower the tariffs. They're just our neighbors to the north. we had this ridiculous back and forth. Like we ought to be really close to Canada, obviously, and we do fight with them, and we have a relationship with them. But this weird thing that we've been interconnected since NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, what Ross Perot called the giant sucking sound. We've had a relationship with them, and Mexico the same way. Something is weird here. I just want to call it out. I don't think America is doing necessarily nationalistic things for the sake of the nation. I think there's something else here. This is my opinion. And I don't know what the play is other than we're being isolated in some way. And the rest of these countries, they're still on board. I mean, if you look at the stated goal, and we're going to get into this here in a second. I have so much I want to cover today. I hope I can get to it. I want to go to Davos. Not me personally. I'd love to go to Switzerland, but not to meet with the banksters. I think I'm good. Let me go to this article. This is the New American, and there's so much stuff in here. I will try to get to everything today, guys. I appreciate you, and I want to go to the chat if you have some ideas on what that actually means. Like our policies, what they're actually saying, it would make you suspend disbelief, like we're actually being nationalistic. And I don't know that I can go that far. I'm sorry. I'm like the Diogenes of radio commentators these days, which doesn't pay well. All right, let's go to this article up on the New American. Larry Fink making people, quote, care about the WEF agenda. I love this. Larry Fink opened the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, the WEF, by stating the obvious: trust in Davos is collapsing. Will anyone outside this room care about what happens here anymore, he asked. The question carried weight because it came from the top chief executive of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, pointedly dubbed master of the universe for its unparalleled influence over markets and corporate governance. As so-called chair of the forum, Fink described Davos as elites meeting in an age of populism. He admitted it now operates under deep mistrust that, however, can be overcome by establishing a better, quote, dialogue. What Fink did not say mattered more. The erosion of trust followed decades of policy shaped by global corporate finance asset managers and public-private partnerships, with Fink and the forum playing instrumental roles in setting up priorities and producing outcomes. Well, yes, we'll get to Fink here in a second, but I just want to point out, like, the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, Jeff Berwick calls Satan Klaus. If you look at their origin story and you look, when are they founded? Oh, well, they're founded in summer of 1971. Oh, that's really weird, because that's when we went off the gold standard. Oh, it must be a super coincidence that these two things are tracking each other. And then you have, following on that time, the opening of China. And then the next year you have the birth of the Trilateral Commission, which is really a bunch of CFR people and the Rockefeller Foundation who decided we needed another elite group on top of the elite group that's even more even more motivated to reshape the world as they see fit. These things are what underline the elite, whatever you want to call them, parasite class or lizard folk. They think the same way. As Gore Vidal said, it's not a conspiracy. They literally just think the same, which again is, the conspiracy underlies that. This is fun. Some commentators treated Fink's remarks as an obituary for globalism. That reading is naive as it is dangerous, since it invites people to lower their guard, which is exactly what it's about. Like, we're nowhere near the point where we can have a sense of overcoming this, right? There is little reason to believe that the world's wealthiest and most powerful interests would retreat when they can adapt, recalibrate, their message and advance their agenda through aligned populist cabinets. You see where this is going? By all indication, the next phase of globalism, forged in response to populist revolt, isn't likely to soften. On the contrary, it will be more technocratic, more centralized, and increasingly reliant on such tools as artificial intelligence to suppress social and economic dissent rather than resolve it. And you see why I opened up with the video of Carney. This is the stuff that I think about. What tactics are being, obviously they used, COVID 1984. They did the lockstep Rockefeller lockdown, Johns Hopkins playbook thing, dark winter. And we went through all that. And it was universal. And you could see like the parroting of all the stations and stuff, and Operation Mockingbird writ large, and metastasizing and doing all the things that it did. And it massive backfire, massive. If it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for 2020, a lot of these things would be sleeping still. A lot of these issues that are now on the forefront where the entire narrative is collapsing. Like the entire narrative itself of what was built for you to perceive reality is collapsing. And I see that in my social media feeds. And the algorithm's obviously feeding these things, but we're talking about influencers, whether it's the position on Zionism or the state of Israel, what its position on the two-party system, politics in general, conservatism, whatever you want to call it, that all the narrative and everything, all the glue that was the BS glue that was holding it together has been destroyed. So they have to come in and do something different. They've been completely exposed for what they are. Like obviously, if you've been listening to my show since 2019, guess who was talking about the Great Reset in Davos? Me, right? But this is long before everything changed and, the world went upside down and we put on our mask and, stayed 6 feet apart. Fink began by challenging Davos itself, greeting nearly 1,000 CEOs and 65 heads of state and government. He noted that outside of the United Nations, this is the largest gathering of global leadership of the post-COVID period. Despite the scale, and echoing the last year's topics, restoring trust, he asked, will anyone outside this room care what we're doing here? For many people, this meeting feels out of step with the moment. We hear about the elites. And how does it play out in the age of populism? How does an established institution make a difference in the era of deep institutional mistrust? Well, yeah, they did that. They built this, this facade over the years of being able to do a great job managing the financial system. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, you completely imploded that. We have an unsustainable system that is collapsing and imploding in on itself. Like you did that. They like to blame it on other things. They'll blame it on populism. They'll blame that. And I think by design, like somebody has to be the bag man. Somebody has to be the fall guy, the scapegoat. And it's got to be nationalism. It's got to be something like that. Is that what we're building? I have an open question about all of this. I hope that I'm wrong, by the way. But it looks more increasingly like there's a setup here. If you just look at the accelerating amount of debt, the accelerating amount of instability, and then you're watching like the reflection of that, the instability, the lack of trust, the lack of certainty, which markets and civilization thrive on certainty. You take those things away and you're inviting chaos, like something fills the vacuum. Fink then turned to capitalism, or rather his version of it. Prosperity isn't just growth in the aggregate. It can't be measured by GDP or market caps of companies. It has to be judged by many people who can see it, can touch it, can feel it, and build their future on it. He called this the strongest critique of the last economic era, stressing later in his speech, this is going to be a test whether capitalism can evolve to turn people into owners of growth instead of spectators watching it happen. The article goes on to say the formulation sounded humane. It also remained safely abstract. Fink acknowledged the enormous wealth was created after the Cold War, but in developed countries, the wealth accrued to a far narrow share of people than a healthy society can ultimately sustain. The observation was accurate. The explanation was absent. Oh, I love that. Goes on to talk about AI. Fink warned that artificial intelligence could repeat the same pattern of concentration. Early gains flow to owners of models, data, and infrastructure. He says, as AI does to white-collar work what globalization did to blue-collar work, we need to confront that directly. Well, it is going to. That's part of the creative destruction of this technology, right? And if you've interacted with AI, if you looked at it, if you've seen what it can do, and I try to study as much as I can because it's the future. You know, you can run from it, but it is the future. You need to know what it is, what it can do. It's going to be completely disruptive. And all those people that were told to go and learn to code, AI does that. And these white collar, multinational, heartless corporations, you know, it used to be what was good for America was good for GM and vice versa. And those days are over. It's clearly, all bets are off when it comes to AI and what it's going to do with the loss of jobs and everything else. You thought Disney was bad, or you thought insourcing was bad, or HB1 visas. You thought that was bad. Wait till you see what's going to happen with AI, folks. And so, the global elite, the Klaus Schwabian types, I've often thought, we call them elite, but it's just because they have access to the printing press. It doesn't make them, they're not smarter. They're certainly not more spiritually advanced than the average person. But just have resources to counterfeit printing presses. That's what, or the proximity thereof. Like the closer they get to the source of the fake, the better off that they are. And we look at them and think, well, they're certainly sharing an ideology. And it is interesting because they're fighting the forces of history. That's what the New World Order is. The New World Order is a consolidation game. It's like we're just taking regional things, interlocking them into trade agreements, and then creating economy sectors out of that once were nations, and then putting them under the banner of one thing. This has been the stated goal of the internationalists for over 100 years. Actually, probably more like 120 years. This was the goal of the Round Table and Cecil Rhodes, and the birth of something like the Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral, as we went over. And this is the whole point has been to create a one system. But humanity's been going in a different direction. And that's the cool thing about being aware of history and how cyclical history works, and then how trends work. And if you go back, and it doesn't mean that we necessarily come out on top here if you're on team people, like if you actually care about the dignity of the human being. Like some of these things and these entities that sprout out of in the last 50 plus years, that sprout out of these this mode of thought, and then the spirit of this, which is consolidate everything into one thing. They're really satanic. If you look at like something like Yuval Harari, the guy who's a spokesperson for the WEF, wrote the book Sapiens. He said that man was a hackable animal, like the human beings can be hacked, like they're computers or they're just cattle or whatever. That's just a theme by the elite. If you read something like Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, like I think that's the way that they just think, right? And this has been behind this mode of thought in the policies, which has been slowly like taking away sovereignty and putting, I think even behind some of the things that we've done in our foreign policy, like if you really look at the ritualistic aspect of our foreign policy post 9/11, like we just plunged our bravest people that were willing to fight and die for the country into a no-win meat grinder war with no point. Like what's the point? And like you can't win it because what's winning look like, and then you just exhaust yourself. You rotate your military into oblivion. You spend trillions. You destroy, lives of the people that live there. There's millions of people. So it's really a ritualistic, sick thing, and with no benefit. And there's like, one nation in the middle is cheering that on. They don't fight it, but they definitely want you to do it. And I found that to be, an unsustainable thing, which was on purpose. But then you look at where we are. We're close to $40 trillion in debt. And the country, this part of the constant warfare and the belligerency of the bureaucracy and all the things that have happened over the past 25 plus years, it really is showing up now in our culture. However, humanity's still trending towards decentralization. So you can still have all these things that happen to us, but we're still trending. If you go back to, this is 500 years ago, it's the Protestant Reformation, and then we get, which was the, you can have your own Bible. We have the printing press and other things. You can go your own way with. You don't have to just have a certain amount of, so-called learned people that can share the information with you. Only certain people can read and whatever. This was the hierarchy of the church or the established order. That was a breaking of things. You have the Protestant Reformation, then you have the American Revolution, and there was some other things that that its cousin, which was weird, which is the French Revolution, didn't necessarily have a lot in common with the American, but there's still this trend to decentralize. In the Industrial Revolution, the technological revolution, you have ethno-nationalism all over the world. I mean, Ottawa's even considering breaking away from Canada. And then you have Scotland, you had the Hong Kongers, you had the Catalonians in Spain. That the trend is decentralization because it's untenable with the amount of people that you have on the planet. So you end up getting into a shared language, shared culture, shared history, and that's have lost the thread. They have to figure out a different way to get you to go along with their plan. And that is one world, one system, and them at the top, right? Just a select group of people. How do we control it? We're getting so much pushback because people don't believe us, because now they know who we are, which is so much fun to watch. Fink's remedy was dialogue. The forum can't remain an echo chamber, he said. He cited the need to listen to people in places like Detroit, Dublin, Jakarta, and Buenos Aires. Davos, he acknowledges, an elite gathering trying to shape a world that belongs to everyone. This is interesting. There's so much pressure that's been put into the system by just we the people. Just the small amount of us that are like, this is not how things work, that it changes the language at the top. I mean, this is a direct correlation of your energy. The less that it's like, look, folks, the global elite and this type of thinking and the power structure is like Tinkerbell. If you stop clapping, they don't function. Tinkerbell dies if you stop clapping. Remember? It's a lot like that. If you just stop believing, like, I don't believe that. And that's a great place to start. If you're in this timeline, is before you just accept something that you've seen, especially with AI, really think things through. Take a minute. It's okay to think. A lot of people want you to do snap stuff, like you're just going to snap to a judgment. Don't do that. Now, obviously, if you're in a life and death situation and it calls for it, make a decision, live with it. But if you don't have to, it's better off in this age. Take a little bit of time. This is one of those moments. Fink's allusion to post-COVID times also underscored how the call for better communication rings hollow without accountability. In early 2020, at the invitation of then President Trump, Fink himself helped shape emergency financial policy that resulted in the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. Fink and his BlackRock continue to play a prominent role in U.S. policy, which may expand further into the Fed. Yeah, well, it has and it will. And that's the game that's being played right now. And you're seeing it. Everything that is changing is showing up in the prices of things, the price of reality, folks. So interesting take there. They're interested in dialogue at the World Economic Forum. And Larry Fink had some interesting things to say last time about Bitcoin. I'll have to go and see if he said anything recently on Bitcoin. He said last visit that Bitcoin was going to 700,000. All right, let's go to the comments. I want to check in with you guys, and then I've got a couple more articles. We'll be able to get to at least two more, I think, before we close out the transmission. Again, thanks for being here. I'll go to the YouTube comments and see. I'll go back to the top here. Patrick Staten says, "Good day to all. Just took my wise wolf up a notch. Thanks, Tony and team, for making it easy." Well, appreciate you for doing that. It means a lot to us. I got my teams working overtime right now, trying to keep up with the price shifts and then the inventory issues. They both happening at the same time somehow. Harps says, "Tony has real bookshelves in the old bank." I do, and I'm thinking about, I don't know, I've got an idea for a green screen that I'm thinking about doing because I want to change the backgrounds or like graphs and stuff, so we'll see. But I did put on some better lighting today. I hope so. Let's see. I appreciate you guys. Yeah. I'll go to the Rumble stream. If you want to watch us, we're over on the America Unplugged channel over on Rumble. I'm currently looking through the window watching my son Houston. He's counting out gold and silver inventory. And he's got a shop full of customers, and Pumpkin is helping, my black cat. Dustin Helm says, "Good to see you, Tony." Bronx Stomper 111, afternoon. It's good to see you, Bronx Stomper. That's a good name. And Chris, "Good day, Tony." Good to see you, man. Dustin Helm says, "National Socialism, when will they roll out the UBI?" Well, that's the question, right? When you have the creative destruction of AI, what follows is UBI. That's the point, I think, of the digitization of money too. I think they go hand in hand. It'll be more and more interesting to see how we stay outside of the system. And I think, honestly, folks, I'm optimistic about it. Have you ever just taken a look around at the intelligence? not like central intelligence, or I'm talking about like the actual intelligence quotient of some of these folks. I think we got pretty good odds here of doing all right. All right, I appreciate you guys. Brandon Bennett is in the chat over on Rumble. So I didn't ignore Rumble this time. I know last time some of you were like, "Hey, us peasants over on Rumble." I just didn't remember, but I got it running this time. So appreciate you guys. All right, this is another one of those subjects worth covering here on the official broadcast of the apocalypse. This is another one of those things that, and I need you to clear your mind of, the fact that you've been inundated for the past 6+ years. But if you'll step back, like a lot of ground has been covered. And when the mass consciousness understands more and more, because it's almost like the push to get us to forget makes it has like a reverberating reverse effect. It's kind of like, if I read a lot of Joseph Murphy, who wrote The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. He was I'm a spiritual guy. I understand that really there's just God, right? There's just that evil exists because people think it up, right? It's like if you listen to my show and you go to the end, there's a quote by Bill Cooper. And it was like, if you take man out of the equation, then evil ceases to exist. Like the planet doesn't have evil on it. Like it exists inside of you. You create it with your thoughts, and especially like, if you're talking about like cursing people and stuff, doesn't really work if they don't believe it. That's the thing about curses and stuff. It doesn't work if you don't accept it. If you don't accept it, it just boomerangs back on the person that does. It's bad energy. Like you're wanting harm to befall someone, so you put it on them. Like, and if they're just like, "Hey, I'm protected by God Almighty," it just goes right back to them. And that's what's happened a lot, I think, with the Bohemian Grove Bankster bunch. I just think they just like think of this like, okay, we need 95% less people so we can talk to Moloch or whatever they do, right? And they put this out and it just bounces back. And so people have this opening of consciousness, and then I remember covering this stuff on my shows. Do you guys know what this was like, 13 years ago? I mean, come on. Like, this is easy now. Like, I'm mainstream. Like, I'm paratruther too, by the way, but I don't go far. Some of the stuff in the truth stuff, and I'm always a truther, because what are you going to be? What's the opposite of that? I'm always a truther, but I think it's interesting that that people have really jumped the shark in a lot of stuff. So you won't hear me. You know what I'm talking about. You can find these TikTok researchers, and I've been on a couple of shows, and I'll ask them about, like I'll give like references to like Jim Mars or Bill Cooper, and they don't know who I'm talking about. All right, let's put this up on the screen. This is Natural News. The sky's the limit. A century of weather modification faces federal scrutiny. Now, can you imagine this headline in 2019? Federal officials are reassessing oversight of U.S. weather modification programs, which have operated for decades with minimal regulation. The review follows severe weather events like the 2025 Texas floods that have sparked public debate over the potential impacts of cloud seeding and other interventions. The U.S. had a long documented history of weather modification, including military programs and presidential discussions of controlling global weather systems. Well, yeah, you had Operation Popeye in Vietnam. That was to enhance the tsunamis, or not the monsoons, maybe tsunamis too. But they had Operation Popeye. That was just one of them, and then you had the Johnson administration's signed. And you have the quotes from Johnson on, the use of weather as a weapon. But been using this for a long time. And since the 1920s, been cloud seeding since the 20s. This is something that is gaining, like people look up in the sky and they're like, well, that's not clouds. And I've been saying this for years. And we're so happy that this is actually it's getting a foothold, because a lot of times folks in the past have just been ridiculed. Like you were just a nutter. Like if you even brought that up, like, hey, that's not natural in the sky. Like those are contrails. And like, they are not. That's literally physically impossible. Current federal law relies on self-reporting with no verification or enforcement, and most states require no permits for weather modification activities. See, the whole fun thing about this is that the entire idea that you could modify the weather through cloud seeding, which is basic stuff, was even looked on at the news like this isn't even real. Like they would not even take it as a news story. Of course it's real. They've been doing that forever. But what's being done now is akin to terraforming, rather than there is like weather modification and cloud seeding and rain and stuff like that. But there's whatever's happening now needs, like, the mere fact that you don't know what it is, right? And it's not even just about the states or permitting. I think this is an operation, but we don't know, because nobody in politics will truly take this on. I think it will in the future, because it's just become so apparent. For over a century, the ambition to control the weather has moved from the realm of folklore into documented government programs and commercial ventures. Now that largely unchecked history is prompting a fresh federal overview, following severe weather disasters and increasing state-level legislative action, see, like you can own the sky, right? It's like going up. Officials are re-examining whether the nation's minimal oversight of weather and climate modification is sufficient for an era of advanced geoengineering. The American pursuit of weather controls is deeply rooted in 1916. San Diego hired rainmaker Charles Hatfield to break a drought. His methods were followed by weeks of torrential rain, catastrophic flooding, and the city's deadliest natural disaster. It's 1916, folks. Federal involvement escalated after World War I and II. In 1947, the military and General Electric launched Project Cirrus, the first attempt to modify a hurricane using dry ice. This inaugurated decades of experimentation, including the public Project Storm Fury and the classified Operation Popeye during the Vietnam War, which used cloud seeding to extend monsoons and disrupt the enemy's supply lines. President John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson both publicly mused about the ultimate goal of weather control, with Johnson noting in 1962 that he who controls the weather will control the world. Again, I think it's interesting that we've just been dismissed for so long. And I've said on my show, like, if you want to talk, and this goes back years, you can go back to the old episodes, and I'm like, this will be a major theme in the future. It's just not now. Like, I'm always like Marty on Back to the Future when he gets done with the solo, and he's like, I guess you guys aren't ready for that, but your kids are going to love it. Oh, let's go back. I'm sorry about that. Today, cloud seeding operations are conducted in at least 9 states, primarily in the West, to enhance precipitation. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration lists numerous other techniques, from hail suppression to fog dispersal. More controversially, research continues into large-scale solar radiation management, such as stratospheric aerosol injection. Oh, that's where we bounce the sun back, right? It's we had to dim the sun like Mr. Burns on The Simpsons. The primary federal law enacted in 1972 operates on an honor system of self-reporting without verification or enforcement. In 35 states, no permits are required to modify the weather. Public and political scrutiny intensified after devastating floods in central Texas in July of 2025, following a prolonged drought. Parts of the region received approximately 13 inches of rain in a short period, causing deadly flash flooding. Days earlier, and roughly 130 miles away, a private company, Rainmaker Technology, had conducted a cloud seeding operation, while geoengineering researcher Dane Whittington suggested a connection. The company's CEO, Agustic Dorico, forcefully denied it. Of course. Yeah, we did it. The ambiguity surrounding the effectiveness and environmental impact of these programs has spurred legislative action, citing concerns over unknown consequences for agriculture, human health, and ecosystems. Well, that's a great start. And I think, again, this will be a major theme if you're watching the future, and it's probably 5 years out or so. Like there may be even, the first, the first third party in the United States was the anti-Masonic party. Like, people thought that the lodges and the Masons had too much power. That was the first, the first populist party outside of the Whigs, and the anti-federalists, which became the Democratic Party, which had the Federalists and the anti-federalists, and that was the first one. I could see part of the planks of whatever is going to emerge, and it's the day after tomorrow, right? And not tomorrow itself, but there's something in the populist movement will have this in it. The current federal review, noted in a recent report, centers on whether Congress must act or if regulatory authority should be reassigned to different agency. Well, that's how I always knew, like, whether something is real, like a movement is real or fake. If you wouldn't acknowledge this, then you're useless. Because it's, I mean, clearly you can just look up and say, okay, well, that's not a cloud. That's not contrails. I'm being farmed. Like there's no oversight on this. I didn't agree to this. This is this is not about consent. And then you got the upper atmospheric, upper stratospheric aerosol injections, the ones that are supposed to bounce the sun back or whatever that we don't know, and you have aluminum and barium and all this stuff and you're raining and letting it rain down on your children or getting your water supply. Oh, but by all means, we can go over and over again about who flew on Epstein's plane, which I guess is kind of a big deal, but you forget all the other stuff that goes along with it. And that's been the major, like we just get a taste and then an influencer will tell you what to think. But this is the real story. Like these are the big stories, the stuff that's done without your consent that nobody talks about, that if you want to find out who rules over you, look to see who you cannot criticize. And I guess if you want to find out, who's ruling over you and what they're doing to you, look at what you can't talk about. As the technology advances, the nation grapples with a legacy of experimentation conducted under open skies, but often in regulatory shadows, determining who should control attempts to control the weather. Well, that's natural news, folks. Again, I'd like to bring you a little bit of what's happening and the trends of what's next. We didn't get to have enough just to tell you what the article title was, but I thought it was fun. This is kitco.com, and it was Fiat is in ICU. This is Mark Thornton on the silver supply crisis in 2026, and I thought it was interesting that he used that language because I've used similar language saying that the dollar was in hospice, and it's not dead, and I guess it'll be reborn, reincarnated into digital, right? That's the future. But something interesting there as we cover parapolitics and precious metals here on the Arterburn radio transmission. If you have the ability, please subscribe to Paratruther, anywhere podcasts are found. I'm working on some new shows there. This show obviously goes up there. That's going to be like the permanent feed. If you can give us a review, it would really help. Tony.gold is the website. That is my main website, arterburn.gold, but Tony.gold is an easy way to get there, and you can subscribe there to the coming newsletter. You can message me there. You can go and look at past shows and look at what Wolfpack's doing. I mentioned earlier on the David Knight show when I was on this morning that we got the trademark for Wolfpack Gold, so that's pretty cool. It's in a sea of not getting many things done these days. That was nice to see. So we are going to build on that. I'm wearing my Wolfpack.gold shirt. I've got it's a separate program. It's along with Wise Wolf, but we're doing something really different there, and I think it's going to become more and more important what we do in real time with the just fixed dollar amount. You give us the fixed dollar amount, we give you the metals, and we're constantly changing those invoices, try to keep you up to date with dollar cost averaging. So it's a great way to get out of fiat and into something real. So go check that out when you can. I'll be back next week. America Unplugged on Saturday with the legendary Don Jeffries and Billy Ray Valentine of the Infinite Fringe podcast. Saturdays, 12 Eastern, right here on this channel, so long as I still have it. So make sure you check out America Unplugged. I think it's a smart show. I think we're on episode 209 or something like that every week. So go check us out there. You guys take care of each other, from Beans the Brave and Pumpkin the cat, Houston, and even Beth. I have a small zoo here, which I love. That's what we have here in Texas, here at the shop. So you guys take care of each other. We'll see you next time. End of transmission.